Good to see you back this week. What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, a very important topic. Resurrection. Resurrection. You've heard about resurrection. Resurrection means to come from death into life. So we all want to be resurrected, right? But there's a prerequisite. First, you have to die. You have to be dead to be resurrected. So when we try to understand resurrection, coming back into life, we need to try to understand the meaning of death. Actually, there's a lot of confusion. Resurrection commonly is considered to be some sort of coming back to life physically. But actually, we're going to see that resurrection really pertains to another coming back into life, a different kind of life. Not a physical life, but a spiritual life. Let's look at the scripture. In Matthew 8:21, Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead." This man comes up to Jesus and says, "Lord, let me go bury my father, and then I'll come follow you." Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead." So we can see, according to this view, there are two kinds of life and death. Two kinds of death. Let the spiritually dead bury the physically dead. So when we're talking about resurrection, we're talking about the resurrection of man's spirit. So actually, we have two bodies. We have a spiritual body and a physical body. Again, let's look at the scripture. 1 Corinthians 15:44 and 45. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. So the Bible clearly shows us that there are two kinds of body, therefore there's two kinds of death. When God told Adam and Eve, "Don't eat the fruit. If you eat it, you'll die," they ate it and they died. They didn't die physically. It was a spiritual death that they experienced. And we have inherited this spiritual death throughout the ages. What are some of the indications of our spiritual death? Well, one indication is we're very much aware of our physical life. We have 5 physical senses. But also we have a spiritual body that is an eternal body that also has 5 spiritual senses. Spiritual seeing, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Yet how many of us here are really aware of those spiritual senses? We're not so aware, are we? Spiritual senses. What spiritual senses? We're not what they call so spiritually open. We're very physically open, but not so spiritually open. Therefore, the result is God and afterlife is very strange. It's a very strange thing. It's something we debate and consider. God and afterlife? Well, we have no real direct communication with that. So the topic of afterlife is always a strange topic, isn't it? Something they talk about on TV after midnight. And they play strange music. And they talk about life after death. It's such an unusual topic. The reason it's unusual is because we don't experience it. So there are many indications that it's our spirit that is in a coma or has died. So when we're talking about resurrection, we're talking about the resurrection of our spirit. When your physical body dies, then that's it. It goes back into the soil, it decomposes, it's not going to come back together. But so many people are expecting, because the scripture tells us that the dead in Christ will rise. This is the resurrection. And so many people take that in such a physical sense that when Christ comes back, if you go by the graveyards, you're going to see amazing things. The people are going to come up out of the graves. You know, it's going to be really such a gruesome thing, actually, if it happens. Like Michael Jackson's latest video. You know. But that's not the real resurrection. The real resurrection is a resurrection of the Spirit. So how will our spirit resurrect? How does the Spirit resurrect? What do we need to do to resurrect our spirit? Ultimately, we need to meet the Messiah. Jesus said very clearly in John 11:25, "He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." And in the 26th verse, "And whoever lives and believes in me, he shall never die." So ultimately, when we graft onto the Messiah, we come out of death into life. This is the goal of resurrection, is the coming of the Messiah and grafting onto the Messiah. But there are other principles of resurrection, and we want to talk about those. The first principle of resurrection we want to talk about is resurrection takes place. Your spirit comes back to life when you receive God's truth, believe in it, and act on it. Receive the truth and act on it. Now, some people think, well, I'm going to be resurrected if I'm a member of the right church. I'm a member of this church, therefore, I'm going to resurrect when Christ comes. Well, not necessarily true. Well, I'm a Christian, and I read the Bible every day. I memorize the Bible. Won't necessarily resurrect you. You got to receive it, believe it, and act on the truth. There's a very important reason why we have to act on the truth. God has given us a physical body. We come to this physical world so that our spirit can grow. The body, the physical body, is like the soil for the spirit to grow. That's why Jesus said, what you sow on earth, you reap in heaven. There is a dynamic relationship of spirit and body. So we need to receive God's truth. God's truth and God's love. We have to receive this life element from God. God's love and truth. And then this inspires our spirit to motivate our body. This inspires our spirit to pass on spirit elements to our physical body, to inspire the body to do good things, good deeds, to act on the truth. It's your spirit that motivates your body to act on the truth. Don't you feel it inside? Sometimes you feel, oh, I should do this. Oh, I should go serve Mrs. Jones, who is sick. Oh, I should go help my mother and father who need my assistance. Oh, I should go help change my best friend's tire, or I fix his car. Oh, I should do those things. At the same time, we also feel something else, always going, nah. Don't you feel that part? It's a real war going on inside for you to do good deeds. This spirit element is constantly working on your body to do good deeds. Do good deeds. Do something for the sake of others. Because when you do good deeds, then your body passes back to your spirit what we call vitality. And this vitality element is what allows your spirit to grow, to develop. That's why we come to this earth. That's why we stay here for a limited period of time, so that our spirit can grow. Our spirit can grow. So unless we have truth, unless we have an environment of God's love and truth and act on God's love and truth, then the quality of our deeds will not be so high. So potentially, God's truth that comes through religious revelation allows us to accomplish the greatest deeds. The greatest deeds. And what are really the greatest deeds? The greatest deed is the deed done for the sake of the whole world. Not just for the sake of my family or for the sake of my town or even for the sake of my nation, but for the sake of the whole world. That's the lifestyle of the saint, to do something good for the whole world, for the sake of all mankind. So without the truth, then we can't do good deeds. So we can see that through history, God has been giving greater and greater truth to man so that man's actions can be of a higher quality. And therefore, the relationship between spirit and body can be more dynamic, and man can grow to a higher level spiritually. So we need the truth. And you got to believe it, but then you got to act on it. So just being in the church doesn't mean that you're going to resurrect. You have to act on the truth in order for your spirit to resurrect. We want to look at another principle. Resurrection then takes place on the foundation of a physical body. On a foundation of a physical body. This means you've got to have a physical body to resurrect. In other words, to get this vitality, in order for your spirit to grow, you need a physical body. That's the sole reason why God has sent us to this world. Because it's only here that we can grow our spirit. Now, how about the people already that are in the spirit? People that haven't really done good deeds in their life. They go into the spiritual world. They haven't grown spiritually. Actually, no one has completed their growth because of the fall of man. Everyone has gone to the next world, the spiritual world, without having to fulfill their entire growth process. Therefore, what do those people do in the spirit world? They still need vitality, they still need to grow, but they don't have a physical body anymore. And resurrection only takes place on the foundation of physical body. There's only one thing that they can do. And you know what that is? They have to come back. Now some people, I just heard them turning the channel. Oh, Kevin McCarthy's preaching reincarnation. Oh my goodness. What's he talking about? The spirit will return. Spirits return to the earth plane. I hope they don't look like this. You know, this sort of looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost. But spirits have to return to the earth plane. Now, this is where the misconception of reincarnation comes from. Have you ever had a deja vu experience where suddenly you have a recollection of being here before, but you know you weren't there before? Or people have had the experience of all of a sudden having recollections from 1845. I was a school teacher in Illinois. How could it be? Only one way, reincarnation. But it's not reincarnation. What it is that spirits are returning to the earth plane and are cooperating with us on earth, trying to influence us to do good deeds. When spirits influence us to do good deeds, then they can gain some of the vitality from our good deed. So it's a spiritual cooperation. So the reason that you may have that kind of recollection, I've been here before, it's not because it's your recollection, but it's because the Spirit is connected to you, trying to help you and to influence you to do good deeds. So how do spirits connect to us? They connect based on your vibration, your spiritual vibration. Each one of you has a spiritual vibration, and you will attract spirits of the same vibration. So if you have a low vibration, then you're going to attract not such high spirits. You'll get the wrong kind of influence. Haven't you felt influences outside of yourself? Sometimes influencing you to do good, other times influencing you to do not so good. And the reality is that the spiritual world is returning in order to cooperate with us, in order to grow, in order to complete their own growth. So the spirits that are working with you mostly are your ancestors, your immediate ancestors. I'm sure a lot of you have had experiences where you've had a very vivid dream of maybe your grandmother or a great-grandmother or grandfather, someone who is very close to you. And this is a very real spiritual phenomenon, that the spiritual world is returning to the earth plane to cooperate with us. Now, we call this returning resurrection. And this happens throughout history, but at a certain time in history, it really happens very, very strongly. And that's the time when Christ comes. When Christ comes, then the entire spiritual world descends around him. There's many examples in the Bible. How about on the Mount of Transfiguration? Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus. The saints of the Old Testament were cooperating with Jesus on earth. The Bible says that Jesus came with holy myriads, many spirits, cooperating with the Messiah. When Christ comes back again, this same phenomena will happen. But the interesting thing is, this will not just happen for Christians, but this will happen for all religious people in the spirit world. Islam, all Christian faiths, all different religions, Hindu, Buddhism, all these realms of the spirit world will descend to the earth plane and cooperate with the Lord at second coming. And this is how religious unity will come about. So religious unity will come about through this kind of spiritual cooperation, beginning in spirit and then manifesting on earth. So there are other principles of resurrection that we'd like to talk about, but I can see that we're running out of time. This is a very interesting topic, isn't it? And the reason it's so interesting is because it explains probably a lot of the phenomena that you've had in your life, spiritual phenomena. And I'm sure you out here and those of you listening at home, I'm sure you've had spiritual experience that you just can't explain. Spiritual phenomena taking place in your life. And the reason is because of this principle. The spiritual world is highly motivated to return to the earth plane, to work with us so that they can gain the vitality necessary to complete their work. Therefore, in our life, we need to try to attract the realm of the saints, the high realm. And the way we do that is that our own vibration, our own spirit, is working on the highest level, that our motivation in life is for the highest thing. And when our motivation in life is for the highest thing, when our spiritual vibration is high, rich, and pure, then we'll attract the highest level of the spiritual world, the realm of saints. So let's, in our own life, then cooperate with the highest realm of heaven. Let's attract the saints. And in order to do that, then let's dedicate our life for the highest purpose, for the sake of God, for the sake of all mankind. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Here are the highlights from Reverend McCarthy's lecture on resurrection. First, there are two kinds of death, spiritual and physical. Second, as a result of the fall, man died spiritually. Third, resurrection means the spirit returns to life. Fourth, resurrection is completed by rebirth through the Messiah.
Earlier in our conversation, we mentioned the topic of eschatology, or the doctrine of the last things. And it's a characteristic feature of virtually every theological system to have a certain kind of vision of the future, vision of the last things. And here in the Unification Church, we have an eschatological vision that's centered on the theme of unification. Now, one of the problems that arises in relation to any eschatological vision is how one sort of brings that vision back into relationship with history and time. In unification teaching, I think it comes up under the heading of the relationship between providence and history. How can we speak about God's working in the historical process, and are there any ways to sort of trace and identify the footsteps of providence in history? And I know that in the American millennial traditions, there's been an emphasis on trying to understand God's movement in time and history in terms of, say, a notion like freedom. In some more religious forms, it's picked up in terms of seeing here in America the unfolding of traditions of religious freedom on the one hand, and on the other, more secularized eschatologies which see the nation as, say, being the bearer in time and history of God's will and purpose, and then it gets secularized in certain ways that raise America up above other nations as a special nation. And this is a major sort of problem, I think, that comes up in theology. How do we understand what God is doing in relation to time?
I myself, coming from a Christian tradition, say, look, we do have to try to see meaning in history, but how man can get God's viewpoint on the meaning of history, and especially on the meaning of the evils, the real evils that happen in time and space, is a difficult subject as far as I'm concerned.
Of course, one of the interesting things is you say we have to find meaning in history.
Yes.
Now, I think that we do have to find meaning in history. Human beings do. They construct it. The question is whether there is one there. And I think there is one. And I think that on this point, I think the Unification Church says there is a meaning of in history. How do we find it? And what is God doing? And the way you find it is that you have to sort of find your location in history, partly by a sense of where we're going in the future. And where are we going in the future? What's the Bible say? I say, don't mean that in a sense. We're going toward one world. We cannot live in a world which is divided into a plurality of nations that are fighting with one another. We need one world, a family of nations. And I think we're moving in that direction. Why so? International communication, spread of technology, one world economic system. The problems to achieve that become greater and greater too. But we're moving toward one family of nations on the political and economic level. I think we're moving also toward overcoming, the biblical vision is overcoming those things that most impede human development. The promise of technology is that we may overcome those physical difficulties that lead to early death, that impede people from growing. The promise of education is the possibility of some kind of higher development of our understanding. We surely believe in universal education for this reason. I think that God intends that.
But do you sense I worry about technology. Granted, it can do this. It can release this process of development, and yet at the same time, I can see to where it can overtake us. The problem, you're not answering my problem of evil. What do I do with evil?
Well, I think that the problem of evil is a very real problem, and it comes up precisely at this point. That as I see the matter, the unfolding of history towards the fulfillment of what God intends does not happen just by evolution and does not happen without the effort of human beings, but requires that human beings accept God's promise and help, and that they themselves become the bearers of this meaning and purpose in history, and where they turn against it, then they sin, evil enters the world, and I would even say God takes away from those people who reject Him their commission, their vocation. And in our own day, it seems to me that this crisis of God's perhaps taking a vocation and a commission away from a people is most to be seen in the events in Germany during the Second World War, where Christian churches failed to maintain solidarity with especially their Jewish brethren, and in that sense denied their own faith in the universality of the human community and under the fatherhood of God.
Dr. Foster, you've mentioned eschatology. Would you care to comment further on unification eschatology and its relation to traditional views?
Well, it has a great deal of continuity with the Christian, Judeo-Christian eschatological tradition, because in that tradition there is this energizing forward look which does give meaning and thrust to historical life and activity. It sort of infuses purpose into history as it points toward a fulfillment in God's realm, both in and beyond time. That consciousness, faith, expectation has ever and again been lost sight of in some considerable degree. I see a great deal of the significance of the unification movement to consist in the revival of an urgent kind of eschatological consciousness and expectation, so that, for example, the young people who are drawn into the movement are, in my own experience from talking with so many of them, are inspired by the sense of a kind of compelling purpose in history to which their own lives can make an immediate contribution, so that the aimless drifting, which is so widespread among young people and other people also in our time, is overcome by this urgent sense of engagement in the preparation of God's realm as the fulfillment of God's purpose for the end of history. And drawn into that, the dynamics of family life and interpersonal life become very central, and that also, it seems to me, is a very, very important thing to happen, because in Christianity generally, in our society generally, the family, the relationship between husband and wife and parent and child, has lost a great deal of its meaningful connectedness with the hope for the end of, and fulfillment of history, so that people carry on their family life but without any intrinsic and intense connection with their religious commitment. And in the unification tradition, it seems to me, one of the very real sources of strength is the strong integration of these various elements into a kind of unified commitment and vision.
Dr. Flynn, as a theologian, what would you say about the divine principle teaching on eschatology, or the last days?
I think that the divine principle doctrine about the last days is very interesting. I've called it a process eschatology. It's something that happens in time and with time and redeems time and space together. I think that the major problem in the world, here I refer to someone like Eugene Rosenstock Pusey. He wrote a very famous book called Out of Revolution. The major problem of the modern world has been war, nationalism, which tends to divide people, ideology, which is in conflict, which generates conflict of ideas between people. What all of these things militate against is the belief of the unity of the human race. And unless we achieve a recognition of our common humanity, East and West, North and South, across all ideology, unless we achieve that, then we're going to have a world ending in destruction. It's very interesting to me that divine principle sees the unity of the human race as being the very structure of creation itself.
Reverend Moon, as I understand it, begins his work out of a context of an experience and vision of Jesus, and being called by Jesus and given a vocation by Jesus to God. And so for myself, I've always been concerned to try to understand the unification teaching in relation to that longer Christian tradition which I am part of and which I see the unification movement in continuity with. I did my doctoral study on Jonathan Edwards, and as an American, the theme of history and providence is one that has played a very large role in our history, and it's one that I have given a lot of attention to in some of my scholarly work. As I understand the unification teaching, divine principle teaching on providence and history, we have here a strong affirmation of a divine being, God, the Creator God, who continues to care and provide for His creation, which is really the root meaning of providence, a God who provides, gives what is necessary, and that we have here a teaching of a God involved in the process of history and trying to bring man back into a richer relationship with those original sort of purposes that God had in creation. And as you're probably aware, there's around within our world a great deal of pessimism, a great deal of nihilism, a great deal of shrugging the shoulders in the face of what seem to be hopeless problems that everywhere confront us. I think the unification teaching on providence and history is an important antidote to that feeling, because that's a feeling that ends in despair and leads nowhere. And instead here we have a ringing affirmation of how God is continually involved in creation, in history, and seeking through those who respond to the divine presence to further those original purposes and bring the kingdom. And I think, again, that that's an important message for us to hear, and is certainly consistent with many contemporary trends within Christian theology, traditional Christian theology.
Welcome, everybody. Looks like you're ready for another exciting topic. We have a real special one tonight. Tonight's topic is, when will Christ return? This is a question that people have been asking themselves for 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, Jesus said He would return, that He would come back. And 2,000 years have come and gone, and we have not seen the second coming of Christ. Tonight we're going to talk about when he's coming. And actually we have some exciting news. And what we're going to announce is that actually you and I, living in this 20th century, we are a part of the generation that will experience the second coming of Christ. When is he coming? The answer is soon, now, today. Jesus spoke very clearly about what the world would be like at the second coming. He said there are signs of the times that you should look for. And we want to examine these things. One thing Jesus said, that many will come in my name at that time. Many false Christs will come. At last count, I think there were over 400 people claiming that they are the Messiah. Jesus said many things that are taking place actually today. Another thing he said, you shall hear of wars and rumors of war. If you just pick up your daily newspaper, certainly we can see that that prophecy is being fulfilled today. There's been more wars in this 20th century than any other time in history. We've seen the first world war in human history in the early part of the 20th century, and then we had the Second World War just 40 years ago. We've seen two great wars, world wars, where nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, as Jesus prophesied. We could also say that today we're in the throes of the Third World War. We see the rise of communism and the battle of communism and the free world. Really, the Cold War is like the Third World War taking place today. Jesus said also that there would be famines and diseases and earthquakes in diverse places. Probably more than any other time in human history, people are starving today. World famine is such a major world crisis, more than any other time in history. And also we've seen in this 20th century the rise of all sorts of unusual and unknown diseases. For instance, I'm sure we're all aware of the rise of cancer in the 20th century. And just recently, I remember reading about the rise of venereal diseases, herpes simplex 2, and all sorts of social diseases that they have no known cure for, running rampant throughout our society. These sort of diseases on the rise. On the news, you hear all the time about some sort of new disease that has no cure. And people are becoming concerned and alarmed about these sort of things. 2,000 years ago, Jesus prophesied that these things would happen as a sign of the end time, as a sign, as a signal of the second coming of Christ. We've seen earthquakes and volcanoes. You know, there have been more earthquakes in the last 20 years. All of a sudden, so many earthquakes everywhere. It's really a sign that Jesus prophesied. Another thing that he said that has only taken place in this 20th century. He said, when the gospel of the kingdom is preached in every nation, then the end will come. Do you realize that that has not happened in all of 2,000 years of history since Christ until this 20th century? So from the standpoint of biblical prophecy, we can say that, yes, this is the time. The 20th century must be that generation that will see Christ. And isn't it an amazing time in history, the 20th century? These past 84 years, man has experienced more progress. We would have to say progress with quotation marks. We've experienced more progress than all of history before these last 84 years. Can you imagine somebody who was born at the turn of the century? That person has seen more invention, more new discoveries, more breakthroughs in technology and knowledge than any other time in human history. Than actually all of human history before this 20th century. Incredible. You know, there's one statistic that's really amazing. 99% of all scientists that have ever lived are living today. Now that doesn't mean that there's a bunch of real old scientists hanging around. But it means there's been just a sudden increase of knowledge and technology. Well, the Bible talked about that as a sign of the end times, that there would be an increase in knowledge and many would run to and fro. Our ability to travel and to communicate is incredible. You know, a couple hundred years ago, to take a trip was a life-risking proposition. To go to another continent was such a rare experience. But today, you can go out to the airport, hop on a plane, and you can go to Europe in just a few hours. Or you can pick up your telephone, and within a few seconds, you can talk to somebody on the other side of the world. Why do you think we've seen this sudden development in this 20th century? It's very clear. Because Christ is coming in this age, and he's coming for all mankind, all the nations of the world. He's coming for all people. So we're living at a very exciting time when we should see the return of Christ. And actually, you know, if we look at history, we can see something else that's very exciting and surprising. Now, we're going to go through 4,000 years of human history in about 5 or 10 minutes. I wish we could have done that in high school. But they made you study it the whole year. Well, we don't have time to explain every detail in this comparison, but I think we can just catch a few things that really say a lot. What we're looking at here is the 2,000 years that led up to the coming of Jesus. And then we're going to compare that with the 2,000 years after Jesus that culminates in this 20th century. And what we're going to see is the 2,000 years before Jesus, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 major periods. And also we see that in the 2,000 years from Jesus until today, there are also 6 major periods. And also, interestingly enough, each one of these periods is the same length of time. Same length of time. 400, 400, 400, 400, 120, 120, 400, 400, 210, 210, 400, 400 years. These are years. 6 major periods of the same length. Well, that's interesting, but even more, what's taking place in each of these periods is virtually the same thing. Now, for instance, the history of Israel from Joseph and the 12 sons of Jacob. The history of the nation, the development of the nation begins in slavery in Egypt. Persecution, repression. The history of Christianity begins in the same way. Suffering, persecution, and repression. Here in Egypt, here in Rome. The history of Israel moves out of the age of suffering and persecution. Moses leads the people into the promised land. And for approximately a 400-year period, we see a period of feudalism, where the people are living in the promised land, but there's no real central government or central unity. It's a feudalistic society of many leaders called judges. Same thing in Christian history. A 400-year period after the persecution in Rome. The Roman Empire disappears after converting to Christianity, and Christianity advances out of Rome and settles in Europe. and for a 400-year period also exists on a feudalistic level. No real central unity, no real united Christian world. And so what we see is divided leaders called patriarchs, church patriarchs. And actually, if you study their function, it was virtually the same as the judges in Israel's history. In the history of Israel, we move out of feudalism into a monarchic society, the United Kingdom. Samuel crowns Saul king, and we begin a 120-year period of a monarchic society, a kingdom, a united kingdom. Same thing in Christian history, a 120-year period called the United Christian Kingdom. That's very interesting because this time the Pope, Leo, crowns Charlemagne king. So amazing parallels here. This lasts both 120 years. At the end of this period of 120 years, then we have a 400-year period of division. The nation was divided into northern tribes and southern tribes. 10 northern tribes and 2 southern tribes. And this lasted for 400 years. After the United Christian Kingdom, also another parallel here, this United Kingdom was divided into a series of 3 leaders: Saul, David, and Solomon. Same thing. Charlemagne, his sons, and his grandsons. And the result here and here was division. This kingdom divided into East and West Franks and also lasted for a period of 400 years. At the end of this period, we see a 210-year period of exile, the Jewish captivity, the Babylonian captivity. And in Christian history, we have a 200-year period of symbolic captivity and exile. This time, rather than the whole body being taken, the leader of the church was held in captivity. The Pope was taken and arrested and held in captivity for a period of 70 years. And totally a 210-year period of confusion, no clear tradition or standard. And the authority of the church really declined, and the people became confused. At the end of this period, there was the same thing, confusion. The traditions were not clear because they had been held in captivity for over 200 years. So what did God do? He sent a prophet. He sent a prophet, and that was Malachi. Malachi came, and if you study Malachi is referred to as a reformer. He's bringing reformation. He's reestablishing the basic traditions of the covenant. And they rebuild the temple. He judges the iniquities that had creeped into the traditions, and he refocused them on the very core of their religious belief, the coming of the Messiah. At the end of this period in Christian history, what great reformer came? Another one came, Martin Luther. And Martin Luther virtually does the same thing as Malachi does. He's a reformer. He simplifies, clarifies the tradition, and he refocuses Christians on the ideal of their religious faith, the coming of Christ. Christ is coming again. This begins a 400-year period of preparation for the coming of the Messiah. All sorts of amazing things took place during this 400 years. But one of the most important things was the rise of the Roman Empire. The rise of the Roman Empire. And then we see the coming of Jesus. And in this 400-year period, one of the amazing things that we have seen is the rise of the free world and democracy, centering on the United States. And it's really interesting because people have done a study of comparing the American culture, the culture of America, and its links to the Roman culture. There are amazing kind of parallels. For instance, our love of sports. We have the same symbol. The symbol of Rome was the eagle. The symbol of the United States is the eagle. So actually we can say then that the coming of Martin Luther in 1517 is the date that he nailed the 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. The coming of Martin Luther then should signify the 400-year period of preparation for the second coming of Christ. So let's add this up. If we add up 400, 400, 120, 400, 210, and 400, we come up with 1930. If we add 1517 as the beginning of this 400-year period preparation, add 400, then we come up with 1917. Somewhere between 1917 and 1930, Christ should appear. So what are we saying? We're not saying Christ is coming. We're saying he's already here. And if he's here, then we have to ask ourselves the next important question. And that is, how does he come? One thing is for sure, if he's here and he's on earth, then there's one more parallel. And that is the life of the Lord's second coming with the life of Jesus. Jesus came to a nation that was expecting him to come in a very cataclysmic way, coming on the clouds. Daniel 7:13. They were expecting Jesus to come in a very cataclysmic way. They were expecting the Messiah to come to their nation, exalt them, and send all their enemies into hell. Today, it is a very common expectation that the second coming of Christ will be in the clouds, and even we use the same Bible verse, Daniel 7:13, to suggest that Christ is coming in the clouds. And we're expecting Christ, the same thing. He's just going to come for us, Christians, going to exalt us and send everybody else into hell. We can see an amazing parallel there. So this means we have to be awake. We have to be aware. We have to be ready for Christ to come in a way that is maybe doesn't conform to the doctrines of our day. We have to be ready. We have to be prayerful. We are living at a very important time in human history. Let us pray. Let us watch and wait. Let us really ask God to guide us as we hear this important message. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Here are the highlights from Reverend McCarthy's lecture on the consummation of human history. First, the prophecy concerning the return of Jesus is fulfilled in the 20th century. Second, the rise of technology is an indicator of Christ's imminent return. Third, historical analysis indicates that Christ should return between 1917 and 1930.